In Revelation 18, a mighty angel declares the fall of Babylon, proclaiming that she has become a dwelling place for devils and every unclean spirit. Another voice from heaven warns God's people, "Come out of her, my people." Babylon receives double judgment, proportional to her arrogance, self-glorification, and unrepentant sin. The kings, merchants, and mariners mourn her fall. In contrast to their mourning, heaven rejoices at Babylon's judgment. A mighty angel cast a great millstone into the sea, symbolizing Babylon's total and irreversible destruction. Who is this angel? Who is Babylon? What does her judgment mean? Let's find out. Welcome back, everyone, to our Revelation series. This episode, we're going to start chapter 18. Ken, we're moving right along.
Yes, sir. On 18, moving on. So
Man.
this is really a sister chapter of 17. And I wanted to also say, Jimmy, as we're starting, that it's so important that if somebody is picking up the study right here, if this is your first video you're seeing, and I know, Jimmy, you and I have talked about that, but there's imagery, there is interpretive rules that we've been using all along, that it would be really important for you to start at the very beginning of this series. It's expected that the viewer has started with our very first video in Revelation and has worked their way through, because we're building on concepts, and it's probable that you'll hear something here that we're not explaining, that has already been explained, that would be very difficult if you haven't started at the beginning.
In case you are new to this channel, if you go to the channel page on YouTube, I have two playlists. One is for these full episodes of Revelation from the beginning to where we are now. And there's another playlist where I break each episode down into 3 smaller portions. So if you can't sit for an hour and a half at a time, I try to break these up into like anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes each, depending on how long each episode is. So there's clips. It's called Revelation Clips and Revelation Full Episodes. So whichever one works best for you.
All right, let's hit it.
Right.
Revelation 18 and verse number 1. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. So the question is, through the ages, has been, who is this angel? Well, I believe that this angel, the identity is none other than our Lord Jesus Christ. I think this is him. And partly because this matches a previous description that John has already given of him, and primarily when he wrote his gospel. Actually, it's kind of neat right here. This is sort of broken up very cleanly for us. The very first part we see of this, I saw another angel come down from heaven. He comes down from heaven. Let's just look at that one phrase here. Let's go to John chapter 3 and verse 13.
And no man hath ascended up to heaven, but he that came down from heaven, even the Son of Man, which is in heaven.
And same chapter, verse 31.
He that cometh from above is above all. He that is of the earth is earthly, and speaketh of the earth. He that cometh from heaven is above all.
And let's just hit it again. John chapter 6, verses 38 and 58.
For I came down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him that sent me. This is that bread which came down from heaven, not as your fathers did eat manna, and are dead. He that eateth of this bread shall live forever.
So just that first part, he comes down from heaven. We've already seen John say this several times in his gospel. Then to the second clause here, he has great authority. Let's look at John 5:27.
And hath given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man.
And 10:18.
No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. This commandment have I received of my Father.
In 17:2.
As thou hast given him power over all flesh, that he should give eternal life to as many as thou hast given him.
So I hope that our viewers are seeing, and this is something we have really hit over and over and over again is that the book of Revelation is written basically like hyperlinks. It's a series of hyperlinks. And so when John is writing down one phrase or one word sometimes, it is connecting to the rest of the Bible. We've said this before, that the book of Revelation is the most biblical book in the entire Bible. What we mean by that when we say that is that the book of Revelation either quotes or alludes to the rest of the Bible more than any other portion of the Bible. So it truly is, as we've said so many times, the exclamation point on the end of a sentence that's already been written. It's pointing backwards the whole time. In fact, the average that some people have counted, I've not done it, taken the time to count it, but some have said that it's about 2 times for every single verse in Revelation. There's an allusion or a quote to other parts of the Bible, usually the Old Testament. So,
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
So, why do you think that John just didn't refer to him as Christ in this particular verse, and and did the word angel here actually in the original language? Did it mean more messenger?
Angel always means messenger. The context is the one that determines who it is. That's all that the word means. And so this is sort of the job of the Bible student, is to understand that there's 2,000-year gap of culture and time and language that have been changing since the time this was written. Unfortunately, we are inundated with the way that our mind works in our own 21st century, and even going back to the previous century, to see things like touched by an angel. There's a big angel movement. And when you hear, touched by an angel, you think a certain thing. But angel doesn't
I
always
always think of
mean.
Michael Landon.
Yeah, Highway to Heaven. Yeah. Every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, whatever. We think of those kind of phrases and in culture. And here's the part, Jimmy, that I think if we, I try to be very honest with myself of my own bias, and that's very difficult, that I have my own bias lens that I'm viewing all of this through. So from the time that I was born until today, I have been taught that words mean a particular thing. So I have an innate bias towards words. And it's very, very difficult for me to check that in at the door and say, Lord, help me to understand this passage as you intended it, as the original audience would have understood it. That's one of our rules of our first video we did together. That's why it's so important. I remember people pushing back on that. And one of the rules is to try and understand this passage or see how the original audience would have understood it. And people said, well, how do you know what they knew? And the point of that is to understand what it meant at that time to do our Bible study and interpret it within the Bible itself. So the word angel here just means messenger.
Those first 10 videos we did, you took a beating.
Yeah, it's part of introducing new material, and I understand that the Word of God is precious to people, and it should be, but it also evokes a lot of emotion, and it's important that we actually go to the text as our authority. But let's develop your question even further. Why didn't he just say Jesus? Well, another reason is because we knew that this letter was going to be passed around, and it was going to be in the hands of the Romans. And if you look back in the very first verse, very first chapter of Revelation, it tells us how this book will be written. First off, you have the revelation from God the Father given to the Son. So a lot of people miss that part. So the Father is revealing to the Son this message in order that Jesus could then pass it on to his servants through the angels. So once you get that order down, and then you see the mechanism that is being used is it's going to be given through signs. So Revelation is a sign book. It's a picture book. So if we were to take the message of Revelation, it's done in pictures or in signs. That's how it's said. And so here, one of the signs is a messenger from heaven, and Jesus certainly is a messenger from heaven. So it's on par with everything, and that is so. I mean, a Roman soldier could pick up Revelation in the first century, read it, and say, "What is this?" You have to know. See, that's the whole point. We're going to get into this in a little bit, but to make sense of Revelation at all, you have to have a working knowledge of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures. It's the mechanism to unlock what this is talking about. These are done in hyperlinks, and if you don't have the ability to click on the hyperlink and go to that web page, You're not going to know what that one word means, especially if there's a series of words that in their order they don't make sense. You have to open up each word and go read it and open it and read it. If you don't have a Hebrew Bible in your hand, this isn't going to make any sense. Or if you don't have a working knowledge of the Gospels, it won't make sense. Some of it, most of it is Old Testament, but what we're looking at is the Gospel of John. The next phrase is the earth is illuminated with his glory. Let's just look at one of these, Jimmy. I think they get the point. There's a whole list of these, but let's just look at John 1, 4, and 5.
In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not.
So let's put our three phrases together. We have one we've looked at. It says, he comes down from heaven. The second phrase was, he has great authority. And the third was that the earth was illuminated with his glory. Now, consider how much we could, and Jimmy, you have, I think, a list in front of you we could have gone over. These are lengthy lists, and these are even smaller than we could make them. But look at how John writes this in Revelation 18:1. After these things, I saw an angel come down from heaven. Who is this? Well, look at the identifiers. He has great power. The earth is lighted with his glory. He's come down. He has great power. And the earth was illuminated with his glory. These are the things we've been saying about Jesus. So he's identified through that. But there's even a more immediate way, and that's in Revelation chapter 10 and verse 1. I'll go ahead and read that. We've already determined that this was Jesus. I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were of the sun, and his feet as the pillars of fire. And that's the one that had the little book in his hand that said his right foot on the sea and his left foot on the earth. And we've already identified this. If you want to go back to the video of Revelation 10:1, we already make the case that this is none other than Jesus himself. And so the identifiers are still there in Revelation 18. We see here he's coming down. His face is as the sun. He's illuminating. His feet come down on earth. There's an idea of authority with the pillars of his legs. So this is the same identifiers in Revelation 18. Let's move on to verses 2 and 3. And he cried, that is, this angel, I'm saying is Jesus, cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So Jesus is announcing here the recap. He's recapping his ministry. The words here in verses 2 and 3 is a recap of the story of Jesus' ministry. He's simply saying here that everything that I prophesied in my ministry has happened. The story in Matthew chapter 21 about the parable of the man who owns the vineyard, and he goes away and he hires the people out for his vineyard. Remember, they kill his servants, they kill his son. It's all come to pass now. Matthew chapter 23, the whole thing, he says, the blood of righteous Abel. We'll look at that in a moment. But we've looked at it so many times already. But the message of Jesus has come to pass. And in this part of the vision, Jerusalem has been destroyed, just like it said. Jerusalem has become the new Babylon, and everything has happened just as Jesus has said. And notice here a couple of things. Jerusalem is the new Babylon, which has fallen. The message is clear. And so I want you to notice also the usage of the word nations in verse number 3. Remember, nations is an important word because it's contrasting with the nation. We've said this so many times, but it's worth saying. It's worth saying a lot because it's so important. Let me add to the board here. When we read the word nations, and I'm going to put a huge S just so we don't miss it, this is the exact same word as Gentiles, exact same word in the Hebrew. So nations is basically a way of saying not Israel. That's a way of saying not Israel. And then when we read the word nation, no S, that's the same thing as saying Israel. Okay, so it's very important that when you see the word nations, it's contrasting with the nation of Israel. And so that's important because it says, for all the nations, S, have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So right there is an identifier because it's all the Gentiles have drunk from Israel. And you can see that when you understand what the words mean. So here in verse number 3, what Jesus is saying here, this angel is saying, is that all the nations have taken advantage of Israel, and Israel has played the harlot. She's played right back to see what she could get out of the deal. Remember, big picture, big picture. Abraham was called, and God called Abraham to be a father of many nations. He made a peculiar people, a special people, and gave them all these strange rules to be set apart as a different sort of people. So he called Abraham out of the nations and became a nation. That's at the base of Mount Sinai because remember, Jacob was a man. His name is changed to Israel. Israel's just a man. That's a name of a man. Then he had a bunch of kids, and Israel became the name of a family. And then Israel became the name of a land. Remember when Dinah was raped, they said this hasn't happened in all the land of Israel. Still not a nation yet. Then they go to the base of Mount Sinai. Israel becomes a nation at the base of Mount Sinai. And that nation is in contrast to the other nations. This is so what I'm about to say, Jimmy. I can tell when people know this issue or not based on if they don't get this one part here. Please get this. Israel was supposed to be a pastor nation. Israel was called to be the missionary nation. It was called to be the shepherd nation. However you want to say it, the gospel of the kingdom was to flow out from Israel to all the other nations. So God put a hedge of protection around it, and he expected results. I'm going to bless those that bless you, Abraham. I'm going to curse those that curse you in your journey of starting to go through and find this promised land. I'm going to put a hedge of protection around this peculiar people. They are a pastor nation. Some people obeyed the covenant. They were called the faithful remnant, but largely the vast majority in the terms of Isaiah, 2/3, the majority did not obey the covenant. Those people basically looked at all the other nations and said, ha ha, we have access to the one true God and he loves us way more than you. That was their response. And so God's going, ugh, no, you're supposed to give them the gospel, not brag that I'm taking care of all your battles. I basically just summarized the whole Old Testament. Now, verses 2 and 3 are saying the same thing. Look at verse 3 again. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So in other words, the nation of Israel, through time in the Old Covenant, up to the time of Jesus, have taken the blessings of God and they basically hoard them out to the other nations. And the other nations were happy to take advantage of her blessings. And this is why we read this strong language here, because if you go to the book of Hosea, Hosea was like a living picture of this. Remember when God told Hosea to go and make a wife of one of the known prostitutes of the day? Hosea is heartbroken. He's like, my wife is not faithful to me. And God goes, exactly, you're a picture of me in Israel. So this is what we're reading about here. Let's go ahead and go to Matthew 21:12-14.
And Jesus went into the temple of God and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them.
Now, this is a very interesting concept, and we're going to get into this a little bit later in this chapter. But let me just make clear one concept, and then we're going to build on this, and that is that Rome gave Israel a place of their own in the temple and kind of let them do their own thing, and it was not part of a tax system. This is so important for people to understand. And so, when you went to the temple, you go to the temple to your annual pilgrimage, and you would go there, and it's very difficult, Jimmy, to travel, 300 miles and bring your sacrifices with you. They'd probably die along the way. And so, out of convenience, it just get your family there and bring some money. So at the temple, they would have different things to sell you. They would have, spices to sell you, or they would have animals. They would have, turtle doves. They would have some lambs there, and you could actually go and purchase these things from the merchants. and buy your sacrifices at the temple. What convenience! One-stop shopping. And you go there, and guess what? That temple money was different than the money that had the insignia or the inscription of Nero on the front of it. Remember, they brought the coin with one of the emperor's pictures and said to Jesus, he said, "Let me see the coin." He said, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's." His image is on there, and if his image is on there, then you need to give his cut of it to him. What Jesus, of course, was saying is that you're made in the imago Dei, you're in the image of God, and so if this coin belongs to Caesar because his image is on there, then by that same reasoning, you belong to God because you're made in his image. That's what Jesus' point was there. But another point was that the temple, and this is what I'm getting at here, is the temple, you could funnel money through the temple. It was sort of like a clearinghouse. It was sort of a way to do money laundering to avoid taxes in the Roman Empire. And so everybody got interested. Oh, the Romans are allowing you to have your own currency here, and I can funnel money through. So it became like an underground currency going on here. And so people are very interested in this idea. And this will become more obvious as we develop the chapter.
If you like this video, hit that like and subscribe button, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.